Audio Unleashed. I guess you can just roll with it, man. We're ready to dive in. There's no need for us to come up with some sort of, catchy intro or anything. Just, okay, I'm going to go. All right.
We make it happen.
We do make it happen. So, so let's just say I'm Dennis, you're Brent. This is Audio Unleashed. People know that from the intro, but let's get into it, man. We're going to be talking about some cool stuff this week, starting off with a story that you sent to me, a review done by John Darko of this $299 Wiim amp. Wiim is capital W, lowercase I, capital M. There was some confusion as to how to pronounce that, but I looked it up before we started recording so I didn't sound like an idiot, and it is indeed Wiim. But they've got this little $299 streaming amp, which is super slick and has a lot of functionality built in. And I have to say, I was kind of shocked by how much it does for the price. So I think that's going to be really cool to talk about and what it means. Is this the way things are headed, or is this is this basically trying to make the model of the past hold on for a little while longer? I don't know. We'll get into it and see what we think. But what do you want to talk about this week?
I was just sitting there saying nothing, waiting to see if you were ever going to give me a hole. Sorry. I was amped up, man. It was fun. It built the tension.
Okay.
So our middle segment for our regular listeners, and our second segment will be on, this is actually old, and I hate to bring up old things because we pride ourselves on being topical here at Audio
Unleashed.
But just out of curiosity, I happened to go to a company's website. Well, the company's Synergistic Research, and the head guy is Ted Denny, and I saw him post something on Facebook, and I was kind of like, what's he up to? And I went to this website. They had this thing, and it's called an HFT. I can't remember what that stands for. High frequency transducer, I think, or something like that. They're about a half an inch in diameter, little round things, about a half an inch in diameter, and they look like they're probably about a quarter inch deep. And they supposedly resonate, high frequency resonators that add all this stuff to your system. And I was looking at that. I think it was somebody who's an actual expert in acoustics. And those are rare at high-end audio shows.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But someone who's an actual expert in acoustics, I think it might have been Tony Grimani, told me about it years ago. And I'm just like, whatever. But I'm kind of like, let me go look at what their claims are. And I'm looking at the claims. I'm just like, oh my God. And then I go look at their reviews. And they have a review on Six Moons, sixmoons.com, which is a high-end audio website. And the review had a statement in there that just really flipped my switches and pushed my buttons and made me think like, I want to take this apart a little bit because I want to show how you and I sitting here without any books or anything, can actually do an analysis of this, just off the top of our heads, that can tell us whether or not this product works. And yet these reviewers are acting as if such analysis is impossible.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do the analysis. I wanted to kind of give an example of like, here's how you can look at these products. And if you have just a high school level understanding of physics, you can determine whether or not they work. And you do not have to hear them. We do know that there's things you can't hear.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we're going to dig into that and do what we hope will be a fascinating physical analysis of this product.
Yeah.
And then what's next?
Next, I don't read a lot of mainstream corporate media, but I came across an article on The Guardian that grabbed me, and I read it anyway. Mm-hmm. And this article is the thing that broke me and made me finally cancel Spotify. The headline kind of says it all. Spotify made 56 million pounds profit, but has decided not to pay smaller artists like me. We need you to make some noise. This is by Damon Kurkowski, who used to be with the band Galaxy 500. Now he's got a band, Damon and Naomi. He's bringing up some really, really interesting points that I guess I was vaguely aware of, but didn't know exactly how bad the specifics were.
Mhm.
So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about why it made me finally cancel Spotify. And I want to talk about why artists like Damon are not allowed to organize to do something about this, because that to me is just about the most frustrating thing about all of this. Yeah. Anyway, what are we going to do for our patrons this week?
I have to point out, since I am a Spotify artist,
oh yeah,
I have standing here, and so I have my own opinions.
Yeah,
and we'll talk about that.
I'm very eager to hear your opinions.
I have opinions. This will not surprise regular listeners to Audio
Unleashed.
So we're doing a Spotify, not Spotify. What is the back end thing? Patreon.
Patreon, yeah.
Until Spotify buys them.
Yeah. Don't joke, man. Come on. It's kind of like Beetlejuice. If we say their name 3 times, they're going to do it.
I'm not joking.
I know.
I heard about this last segment on the delightful podcast Your Morning Coffee, which is a great music industry podcast, and which I listen to every Monday when it comes out. And they had a segment on how Google has introduced a new AI music tool that lets you create music tracks using AI generated voices from famous singers. And the singers are buying into this. And this famous singers include T-Pain is the one I grabbed onto because I know what T-Pain sounds like.
Dua Lipa is one of them, right?
Dua Lipa, is she one? Yeah, I think she's one. And Charlie Puth, who I did actually have a high-res recording of him for some reason.
Oh, no, I was wrong. It's not Dua Lipa. It's Demi Lovato
and Charlie XCX. And Charlie XCX is similar enough to Dua Lipa in my view, to where the AI could not distinguish between the two. I certainly can't. But they have so they're getting the buy-in from actual famous people. John Legend, who's a really good singer,
Yeah.
So I mean, T-Pain, like anybody with not a vocoder with auto-tune can sound like T-Pain. Why do you need the AI generated version of T-Pain? I mean, the guy can actually sing. He just chooses not to. But why do you need that? I think, who was that guy, Andy Samberg on Saturday Night Live, proved that beyond the shadow of a doubt in an actual skit that involved T-Pain. But anyway, that is going to be, and I think this has, the reason we want to talk about it here on Audio
Unleashed
is because I think this has significant ramifications. That's the word I'm looking for quality audio, because when it's AI generated, are you starting to get where quality doesn't matter as much? I mean, I don't know, but we're gonna work all that out for our Patreon subscribers.
Yeah.
So
we should
start with the Wiim. I was pronouncing it Wiim, so people that think it's pronounced Wiim will know it's Wiim.
Yeah. I thought it was Wiim too, but I just decided before we started, I'm going to Google how do we pronounce this, and it's Wiim.
So
anyway, though, this is well, you sent it to me, you ought to know, but this is a review from John Darko. So and again, like one of the things I really like is that John does a good mix of YouTube stuff and print stuff, because sometimes I want to watch a video and sometimes I just want to freaking read and I don't want any noise. And I like that he is, I mean, I gotta say the dude is just really media savvy in a way that I wish I were. But this is on Darko.audio. This is a print review of the Wiim amp. I was really impressed by what you get for $299 from this thing.
Yeah.
Do you want to describe what it is?
I do. So it's a streaming amp, and this is an increasingly popular category. I mean, this was pioneered, I guess, by Sonos years ago. I mean, Sonos kind of launched with streaming amps, and to where you're pulling sound off of a network. Well, you get AirPlay 2, you get Chromecast, you get Spotify Connect, Tidal Connect, and it's room ready.
And they've got their own app that integrates Qobuz and Amazon Music HD.
And so this is the Wiim app, the app that comes with Wiim. I have one of their little cheap streamers that are, I want to say $89 or something, right? And they're really good. I mean, like Stereophile reviewed it and measured it and was like, oh, this thing's really good. It uses a generic app that's found in, it's somebody makes the app. It's not generic. I'm really misspeaking there, but somebody makes the app. I can't remember the name of the supplier for the app, but it's the same app, but lots of different brands use it. Like we had an OSD streaming amp that used it, and I've seen it in at least one other brand of stuff, but it works fine. So that's good.
They just skin it, right? Every time, each different company has their own individual skin for the app, right?
Yeah. So, but it works really well. And so I don't care if it's all the same. And actually the products will connect. So you can get this Wiim amp, and if you have like this OSD amp, you can get them both on the same network.
So it's kind of like Play-Fi, but not terrible?
And actually, I got it to work. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so it's definitely not like
kind
Play-Fi.
Of is. It's kind of doing what Play-Fi is supposed to do. Right? It has all those things that you can do. So you can pull stuff off of streaming services. You can tap into a hard drive that's on the network. You can combine multiple ones of these things and other compatible products that use the same app in a multi-room system, et cetera, et cetera. Just pretty much as you can with Sonos, right? But this thing is like half the price of a Sonos amp. And basically pretty much does all the things that Sonos does. John's saying that the Sonos port, which is not their amp, that's just their line level thing, is 449 euros. I don't know what euros is to dollars these days, but the Sonos thing here, the Sonos amp is like $600. And this is $300, and it looks fine. It actually looks a lot kind of like the Sonos product, I guess. And it, according to John, it really works well, and it sounds good. It's got, what is the power of this thing? Is it like 50 watts a channel, Class D? 60 watts a channel, Class D.
60 watts into 8, 120 into 4. So it's
plenty for
Class D.
All but the most demanding speakers. How many times have I written that phrase in my life? And it's got
assuming it's got a good power supply.
Yeah, sure. And it's got an analog input as well, so you can hook it up to whatever. And I'm sure it has a digital input as well, so you can hook it up directly to, I don't know, maybe your TV or something. And it's got HDMI, so you can use this. You can hook up 2 stereo speakers, use them, and use it like as a sound bar. Okay. Which our good friend Steve Guttenberg used to call home theater 2.0. And he did have a point. You know, that is a good thing.
But
what?
But Brent, this isn't just home theater 2.0. This is home theater 2.1, because this thing has got legitimate DSP powered bass management in it. It's got a subwoofer output, and it's not, and the subwoofer output has an actual legitimate modifiable crossover. So you do real bass management.
Yeah, which is,
I think that's cool. That's one of the coolest things about this thing.
Starting to happen more in 2-channel gear, but not in high-end 2-channel gear. I mean, like, there's like Parasound and Class A both have 2-channel gear that has, subwoofer output, but hardly anybody else. I think probably NAD.
Yeah, the NAD amp I just bought, but
this is a $300 thingy, and it's got legitimate bass management in it, which, go find me a $30,000 integrated amp that has bass management. That would be tough.
Yeah.
And this thing has more power than a lot of those amps do. Although it's not as heavy. You can't, and no one's going to walk into your house and go, what is that thing? It does not, it is not a status product. It just works.
No, not at all.
It just works. And I will say, they had contacted me a while back to see if I wanted to test one of these. And I said yes. And I completely forgot. Because, lots of people contact me and say, hey, you want to test this? And I'm like, yeah. And then I forget. And then it arrives 3 days later or a year later or whatever. Literally a year. There's one there's something I saw at the last CES that is supposed to arrive like kind of about now. And it's been a year. I don't think it's going to make it. because holidays. But who knows? But anyway, this thing is really nice, and I want to. It's like I would just go out and, if I wasn't reviewing this, I'd probably just go out and buy one, because if I have an HDMI connected stereo system that has Bluetooth and has Wi-Fi streaming and has an input or two, I'm done. This is like all I really need, besides a set of good speakers.
And it's got Alexa built into the remote. So it's a Bluetooth remote control, so you don't have to aim the remote. And there's a microphone button at the top of the remote. You press that and you're talking to Alexa.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
And there are two other really cool things about it. It has in the app a 10-band graphic EQ, which whatever, but then it's got a 4-band parametric EQ.
Oh, that's heavy duty.
Which that's kind of freaking awesome. And I would imagine there are probably some people that are going to gripe about the fact that it's only 4 bands, but man, with 4 bands of parametric EQ, you can fix most of your standing wave problems in your room. You might need something like Room EQ Wizard to measure and see what you need to do, but with 4 bands of PEQ, you can fix the problems in your room pretty darn well.
Well,
so
I remember there's
awesome.
a guy named Mark Trainer who gave this incredible seminar a few years ago at an AES show, Audio Engineering Society, about how to build a smart speaker. And he was one of the people that spoke. It was a day-long seminar about how to build a smart speaker. It was just one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. He was saying that all he needs to get really good sound out of when he's designing a Bluetooth speaker or something for somebody is 4 filters and a limiter, and 4 filters. And here's a guy who knows what he's doing, who says he can tune any speaker with 4 filters. So 4 filters, 4 parametric filters is plenty. That is a lot.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You have something similar to this in Reaper, where you're doing EQ, and the stock EQ in Reaper, which works really well, I think, has 4 bands, and you can and they are parametric, and meaning you can adjust the width of the band that it affects. You can adjust, whether it's high pass, low pass, band reject, shelving, whatever, and then you can adjust the width of the filter and also how much it cuts or boosts. And so you're used to that. Reaper you can add, but it gives you stock 4 filters. Do you ever use more than 4?
Don't think I do.
Have.
No, no, I don't think so. Although in Reaper, most of the time, what I'm looking for is to get rid of resonances.
Yeah.
It's a little different from what you're doing with a speaker system. But no. And the other thing to consider is when I'm mixing and mastering the audio for the podcast, I'm doing not 20,000, but I'm doing 80 hertz to let's say 12 kilohertz, right? But when you're doing PEQ for your room, you're going a couple of octaves above the Schroeder frequency of the room, and that's it.
Yeah, true.
Pretty much.
True.
Anything above that, you probably ought not be messing with. You really ought to be treating that with acoustic treatments, right?
But anyway, so
that's even more power over a smaller bandwidth.
So John is saying here, John Darko again, I've not seen value for money fly this high in entry-level hi-fi since the Logitech Squeezebox Touch hit the streets in 2010. And that makes the Wiim amp not only a Darko Award winner, but a very strong contender for Product of the Year. And I would probably agree with him. I haven't tried it. I will be trying it soon. But this to me is like a dream product. This is like what I've been kind of hoping for a while now, and thinking if I just had, because I've tested a whole bunch of these streaming amps, right? And I think I did test one with HDMI, but it had some problems. And so I didn't end up recommending it. But I'm kind of like, God, if they had one of these things that really worked right, then this would be a great product. And I also think it was $600, and this one's $300.
A couple of months ago on the Soundstage Audiophile podcast, I produced that, and the host, Jordan, was talking to Lawrence Dickey, legendary speaker designer, Bowers & Wilkins. He designed the Nautilus and a bunch of other things. And Jordan was asking him about active loudspeakers, because Lawrence originally started with a passion for active loudspeakers, and he's moved away from that. And he's kind of these days, No. The problem with active loudspeakers, and this is just Lawrence talking, this is not me saying this, but he's like, the problem with it is like, okay, the electronics in that thing die, and now you're left with a dead product. And like, the speaker is probably the thing you spent most money on. He was like, no, get a really good passive pair of speakers and get something like this Wiim amp. He was like, then you've got pretty much the same thing. So he advocates for this plus, a good pair of passive speakers or, 2.1 speakers over having an active speaker system.
Oh, can I add one?
I think a lot of people are.
Can I add one little thing here? I just want to commend John, because so many high-end audio writers are subwoofer phobic, and he is really not, and he does a great job of explaining what since this thing will both low pass your subwoofer so the highs don't come out of your subwoofer, and it'll also high pass your main speakers so the low frequencies don't come out of your main speakers. And he gives a really good explanation here of what the value of that. He says the on-paper benefits for a two-way, like the Project Speaker Box, which is what he used with it, goes something like this. 1, a high-pass filter is applied to the speakers to deprive them of low-bass duties, which then, 2, reduces the mid-bass driver's excursion, which in turn, 3, reduces the voice coil heat that would otherwise cause 4, the mid-bass driver's input impedance to rise enough to 5, compressed dynamics. That's nice. I mean, it also
nice.
Also reduces distortion too. But still, it's like he did. This is a really nice explanation of something that frankly, I think a huge number of audiophiles and a huge number of high-end audio writers do not understand at all.
And I think it's a super concise explanation. Yeah. I think if Doug Schneider of Soundstage had said, hey, write an article about that, I would have spent 500 words explaining what John explains in one sentence.
It's really good job,
really
John.
well.
And, it's like we talk so much about oligarch phi and stuff like that, and how ridiculous some of this, and how targeted towards just consuming as many dollars of rich people as possible. So much of this stuff is, but this thing is not that at all. This thing actually, assuming it does everything he says it does, this thing delivers really good sound to people for cheap. And you can hook this up to, and you still, one nice thing is you still have the personal expression, so you can go buy the products you like. So you can hook this up to, a pair of LS35As if you want to explore the legacy of that fabled BBC monitor speaker, or you can hook it up to some, it's really, you could power most big tower speakers with this thing, or you can go buy some little Dayton Audio doohickeys off of Dayton Audio for like next to nothing, or you can go get an old vintage Pioneer speaker from the 70s, and whatever you feel like hooking up to this thing, so you still have a system that you dig. I kind of don't like the notion that your audio system has to be an appliance. And, with this, it's like, okay, well, maybe this amp is an appliance, right? But it doesn't even look like much. It's nicely styled, but it doesn't look like much. No one's going to notice it. People will think it's like some kind of little computer probably. But, then you can hook up whatever speakers you want. And, it should do a reasonably good job of driving anything that's not just a crazy speaker. You could go get one of the little sets of like Magnapans that are like $600. You could go get all sorts of cool speakers for this thing. Your selection is just endless. And then you have a competent little component to drive them with. And then your cost is $300 plus anywhere from, free to $1 million for your speakers.
Yeah. Oh, buddy, it's freaking me out a little bit to hear you so calm and nice. I want to hear you rant. Should we take a break so you can build a rant up?
That'll let me build my energy up for the coming storm.
Brent smash.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right, we'll be right back.
And we are back. This is Audio
Unleashed.
I'm Brent Butterworth.
I am Dennis Berger.
And we are here in our second segment to talk about a product that I don't want to say I stumbled upon it because I was dimly aware of it, but I was motivated to go to the manufacturer's site just out of kind of, because once in a while I'm kind of like just looking around going like, what are they up to? And I've known this manufacturer for a long time. The manufacturer is Synergistic Research. The guy who runs it is Ted Denny, who I met when he was just starting out in the 90s. And when he was just making some cables, which I guess he still makes, but he seems to focus. I mean, I haven't spoken with him in years, I guess, but he focuses a lot more on these sort of, so-called tweaky products, right? And he had one called an HFT, and I was kind of like, oh, I never really looked at that thing. I think I mentioned somebody like a Tony Grimani type of figure had told me about it. Mm-hmm. Not approvingly.
No way.
No. Not like you got to check this. If it was, I don't know if it was Tony. I don't want to but whoever said it, I don't, he did not say, oh man, you got to check this thing out. He might have said like, oh, you got to check this thing out.
Yeah.
But
kind of like somebody tastes something disgusting and they're like, oh, you got to try.
But I looked, I was kind of like, I should go look see what claims they're making. And like right at the top, it says here, so this is called an HFT, and they are little tiny things, or they as Synergistic puts it, they're about the size of a shirt button, so they're maybe half an inch in diameter, and I would guess they're probably 3/16 of an inch thick, depending on which variant of them that you get. They are typically $300 for a 5-pack of these little things, right?
Right.
And the idea is that you put them, they have a bunch of guides as to where to put them. Like you can put them, and you use like a little bit of blue tack, that poster adhesive stuff that people use to stick their speakers down. You can use that to stick them onto you stick them on like the front of your speakers, and you stick them onto like your
side of the speakers
as room treatment.
Yeah.
And I will say again, these things are like a half an inch across, right? And so I'm looking at this going like, okay, my knowledge of physics is kicking in real fast. You're going like, okay. And I also know acoustics. I've read all the books not all the books on acoustics, but the ones that, the famous ones, the F. Alton Everest Master Handbook of Acoustics and the Floyd Tool Book, which is not about it's acoustics is one of the things it deals with. And, so I have a decent command of physics. And so I'm scrolling down this page and I'm looking at like all these reviews that are just like, and so the company's saying about the size of a shirt button, yet powerful enough to transform the way you experience music.
Yeah.
That's a big claim. I mean, going from a really crappy speaker to a good one, I would argue, transforms the way you experience music, right?
Yeah.
So that's a pretty big claim. I mean, as opposed to say switching from one good Class A B amp to another good Class A B amp does not transform the way you experience music.
No, right?
They're extremely similar. So if anyone says, oh, it transforms the way you experience music, it's like, come on, people. So I'm seeing all these like glowing reviews, and they list one on sixmoons.com, which I actually kind of like to look at on occasion. Some of these sites I really don't enjoy looking at because just like blah, 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 blah. But 6 Moons is kind of wacky and eccentric enough to where I'm kind of amused by it. So anyway, this review goes way back. I feel bad because like this review goes way back to 2014. So this is like 8 years ago. But I'm starting to read it. I'm like, okay, they had if it's in 6 Moons, all the reviews are long and they go through all this stuff, and it's kind of like, okay, well they at least dug into it and didn't just like slap the things in and go, oh, it's great. But then the statement, the publisher's forward here, I started reading this and kind of like, and this just really got me going here. And it's talking about how just a few years ago, the subject of acoustic resonators was not only new, but highly controversial, with commentators who'd never experienced them quick to denounce them as voodoo tweaks which couldn't possibly work. Well, that's a weird statement because, Helmholtz resonators are commonly used in acoustics. And when did he die? I mean, like 100 years ago or more. I don't know. But it's like, the writer talks about how he was introduced to these things. And remember, these are half an inch in diameter. And they look like little tiny trumpet things, like trumpet bells. They're kind of like a little inverse cone thing. And I guess they're made of aluminum or something, some kind of metal. And he says that, when he saw him at the 2013 Rocky Mountain Audio Fest, he described them as the single most impressive demo I heard at this show and possibly any show. And you have to look at this and go like, these things are like a half an inch wide. And you buy a pack of 5.
Yeah.
And you can add more, obviously. But there's more publishers comment. So it's like, as blah, 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 the various explanations given for the precise workings of this group of devices often seem vague, the associated language unscientific. Well, okay. In fact, the language usually just describes the effects, not really how they're achieved. This would indicate a lack of understanding. It's simply that scientific-minded people tend to shy away from products whose workings hide behind quasi-magical descriptions.
You think?
Yeah, for good reason. Sort of like if a grizzly bear is charging at me, I'm kind of like, I got a problem here. Right? So, I mean, it's like if you have a quasi-magical description, I'm probably not going to believe it. And that's because I've heard lots of quasi-magical descriptions, and they were usually the products that are applied to don't work.
But so here's the thing, like this isn't even quasi-magical. It's just straight up magical, It's just, that's why reports like Steve's, that's the writer, who spent considerable time to experiment with them, helps to legitimize such products until such time that more properly scientific explanations as to their actual operation become available. Now, this was 2014. Do you think, Dennis, that a properly scientific explanation for this product and the rave reviews it's getting, do you think that is now available to us through science? No.
I disagree with you strongly.
Really?
A completely scientific explanation is available for this, but it's not acoustical, it's psychological.
Good point.
So, which is, confirmation bias, right?
and the placebo effect.
The placebo effect. The placebo effect, exactly. It really upsets me, because the attitude here is, it's okay for you to believe whatever you want to believe. Someday, science will catch up to you.
Yeah.
Because you're smart. Well, no. Okay, the thing is, you and I can just sit here and figure out whether or not these work. We don't have to hear them, right? In the same way that, if my mom, who lives in the Houston area, is having problems with her TV remote, which I almost guarantee you she is, on any given day, and she starts yelling at it, will I hear that up here in the Seattle area? I will not. And I can explain to you why I can't. The acoustical reasons why I cannot hear my mother from a couple thousand miles away, right?
Right.
So we know that you can't hear things. I thought, let's examine these things and figure out whether, go through our process of figuring out whether or not these things can actually work without us actually hearing the things. And let's point out, if someone can present a scientific explanation of these, not an explanation of how they work, because anybody can make anything up, but let's see some actual listening test results where these things made a difference. All right. Yeah. Blind, controlled listening tests by a third party. Don't let the manufacturer do it, because a lot of manufacturers are pretty good at coming up with definitive testing that proves their product works. And then when you get it outside the manufacturer, nobody can get it to work. But look, we're happy to change our minds and issue an apology if someone can say, here's a controlled test, a legitimate controlled blind test where it proved these things work. So these things are half an inch, right? And we figure that something that's, physics dictate that something that's half an inch in diameter is going to resonate at something like, that's fine. Let's say it's 27,000. I'll keep going. You correct me if I ended up being wrong.
Sure. Okay.
So We know these are going to resonate at like 27,000 hertz or thereabouts, right?
Yeah,
and
27,008 hertz. I found omnicalculator.com. This is what I'm using for all the calculations. Yeah.
Okay. So I just used my brain. My brain is more powerful than any calculator.
That is true. That's a true story.
Anyway, so if these are going to resonate at 27,000 hertz, right? Okay, well, that's ultrasonic, right? That's not something that you can hear. People debate about to what degree the human body senses ultrasonic frequencies. And there's some science behind that, but it's not like you're going to hear 27,000 hertz and go, oh my God, that's a huge difference, right?
Yeah.
No. Your dog might. Okay, so for pet owners, but we're going to prove how even for pets, these things are not physically capable of doing anything. So they're supposed to resonate, right? And I'm not sure that why you need a resonator at any particular frequency except a Helmholtz resonator to get rid of a room mode in your room. Like in the bass. Like if you've got a big hump at 60 hertz, you can put in a Helmholtz resonator that'll suck up some of that, right? Mm-hmm. But you somehow need these resonators, and I guess maybe they add their own something, but you can't manufacture energy, right?
Correct.
So you can only get out of a resonator what you put in. It's kind of like a battery. You can only get out of a battery the energy that you put into it minus whatever loss was involved in charging and discharging the battery, right?
Right.
So out of a resonator, you can only get out of it what you put into it. Mm-hmm. So what are you putting into it? Let's just say that your tweeters are actually outputting something significant at 28,000 hertz, and that your program material is that you're using high-res audio, and that there's actual content at 28,000 hertz, right? Okay, so those are both questionable things, but let's just say it does. Yeah. So,
and also you have to assume that your amp doesn't have significant intermodulation distortion above 20,000 hertz.
Indeed. Yeah. So let's just say there's always 28,000 hertz energy coming off your tweeters, right? Mm-hmm. And how much of your room's square footage is going to be dominated by these dominated by these resonators? That's like saying a Chihuahua dominated the Russian army or something. But anyway, how much of your square footage is commanded? How much? So what we want to figure out is how much of the actual energy coming off your tweeter is going to hit these resonators and then be resonated back out at you. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was figuring a 14 by 10 room, which is a small room. It's like that's relatively small as listening rooms go, but it's adequate.
Yeah.
With an 8-foot ceiling, you'd have somewhere around 600 square feet of surface area, right? Mm-hmm. And since tweeters are directional, and they're really directional at 28,000 hertz, let's just say that there's not going to be any back wave unless it's reflected back there, right? So let's even cut that down. Let's cut it down to a couple hundred, right? Square feet that your tweeter's actually going to be radiating at. And these things, if it's 200 square feet, these things are each one of these things is about, it's not even a quarter. Let's just say it's a half inch by a half an inch, right? Just because we're too lazy to apply pi.
Yeah.
Because then 3.14, I can't multiply in my head. So let's just say that 4 of these things per square inch is 144 square inches. So it's somewhere around, let's just say it's 600-ish, just for back of the envelope calculations. So it's 1/600th of a square foot. Mm-hmm. And you've got at least a couple hundred square feet of area over which this is radiating. Mm-hmm. So I said 600, so 200 by 600, that's one. So one of these things is going to be getting 1/12,000th of the energy off your tweeter. Something like that. That's the direct energy. There'll be some reflected energy here and there, except really high frequencies are soaked up by even thin carpets, right?
Yeah.
So that's going to be, those sound waves will die quickly once they bounce around
having
the
a
room
listener in the room is going to change those calculations way more than these things will, right?
Oh God, yeah, hugely.
You add a second person to the room with you, like you've literally changed the physics of what's going on these things by an order of magnitude, probably.
Right. These are the equivalent of like a Chihuahua wrinkling his nose, and literally. And
Yeah, I
so
know.
it's like 1/12,000th of, or something like that, of your tweeter's energy is going into this thing, and it's resonating it back out. Let's even assume it's a completely lossless resonator, right?
Yeah.
And all the energy that goes into it comes right back out. And so you've got this incredibly tiny amount of energy. So you've got, a 12,000th of, I'm not going to do the math. What is 1/12,000th of, let's say, 80 decibels? Except it ain't going to be 80 decibels because it's 28K and your tweeter's already diving and there's no content there anyway.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's this incredibly
if you
tiny amount of energy coming off these things.
If you stand in the other room and sneeze, the air velocity from your sneeze hitting your volume control is literally going to have more effect on the sound than these things will. That's it.
So it's like, but we're doing all this stuff, and this is very, seat of the pants, back of the envelope, cocktail napkin, whatever. And yet we're sitting here going like, yeah, this is implausible. We cannot see any way this is even remotely close to plausible. And yet these hi-fi writers don't do these calculations.
Mm-hmm.
And they just believe whatever these manufacturers say. Really smart people have been researching this for well over 100 years.
Yeah.
And we understand how this stuff works. Whether or not this manufacturer does, I don't know. But it's whether or not these reviewers understand it, I don't know. But they're certainly willing to, at the very least, pretend they don't. And I think they probably don't.
Yeah. At some point, any sort of anything like this, there comes a point to where you either embrace the absurdities or you're a heretic and you're out of the club. And it's like, sometimes I think the more absurd the absurdities are, the more that proves that you belong to this in-group. It's us versus them, right? I mean, most things in life are us versus them. Let's face it, right? So if you are willing to swallow this, well, you're a true audiophile, right? You're really part of the club, and your opinion now matters. And so when you say something, people listen. So it's disgusting, but it is what it is. And it's true in audiophilia. It's true in politics. It's true in religion. It's true in all sorts of things. So, man, I thought you were going to be the one that ranted more here.
Oh, I ranted enough.
Yeah, it's true.
So should we move on? Have we given this all the attention that it's due?
If I wanted to introduce one very simple concept for people to keep in mind when they're thinking about stuff like this, they don't have to do a lot of math about, they can just sort of intuitively think about signal to noise. We talk about it a lot when we're talking about measurements and stuff like that. Yeah. But I think if you just keep that concept in mind, like how much you went into this, you did all of the math that would sort of like talk about how many decibels difference could this conceivably make if it did make a difference in the audible range, right? But just think about that, like these tiny little things, given the output of the sound of your sound system, how many decibels difference could they possibly make? And I think if people would just think about the concept of signal to noise, they would have to do a lot less thinking about garbage like this. Do you think that is a
great way to put it?
Anyway, I got to go get some water, buddy. You want to take a break?
You better. Okay.
All right,
we'll take a break. We'll be right back.
All right. Welcome back. I'm Dennis.
I'm Brent, and this is Audio
Unleashed.
And what are we talking about now?
We are talking about Spotify. And we're talking about why I quit Spotify, why I canceled Spotify this weekend. But we're going to be talking about it by way of an article that I found in The Guardian by Damon Krakowski, who, as I said before, used to have a band called Galaxy 500. He's written this really compelling article about what Spotify means for smaller artists. And it's talking about the fact that starting in 2024, Spotify will stop paying anything for roughly 2/3 of the track on its platform. Basically, anything that receives fewer than 1,000 streams, they're just not going to be getting paid anymore. Now, Spotify's still going to be bringing in the same amount of revenue, but because of the way they divvy up their revenue, it just means that the larger labels and the artists at the top, the Taylor Swifts of the world, are just going to be making more money. And 2/3 of the tracks on Spotify, those artists are just not going to be making anything. It's really interesting. I sent you the article, and I would say you probably have a much more valid opinion on this than I do, because you actually have tracks on Spotify and I don't. What do you think about this? What do you think about this change that now basically 2/3 of the tracks, the artists are not going to be able to monetize them, but Spotify's still going to be monetizing them and giving the money to somebody? How do you feel about that?
Well, given that I shirked my responsibility as a human being and did not go see Taylor Swift, I'm glad that my money, my fraction of a penny, is going to Taylor Swift, or equivalent. Like there's an equivalent to Taylor Swift. Come on. But so here's the problem with this. And here's so for musicians like me, all right, which people like me are the vast majority of people on Spotify. But people like Taylor Swift are the vast majority of streams on Spotify. People like me, I mean, none of my tunes is over 1,000 streams at this point, even though we had really good jazz radio play. We had the number one tune for 2-3 weeks on the Roots Music Report radio chart.
Wow.
Jazz radio chart. And we had the number 3 album for 1 week or whatever. So we were up there with big name artists, and we still don't have much for streams. I don't know what we are on the other platforms, but to my knowledge, unless Ron, my partner, is hiding something from me, we haven't gotten anything on that yet. And of course, we have a record company. I'm not sure if it's registered through them or something or what, but I don't think a check came anyway. And if the check came, it was for like a couple of pennies. Yeah. So, for artists like me, the only way to make money, any significant amount of money on your recording, is if you actually sell CDs or downloads. And, we have sold some CDs and downloads. And if we got off our butts and went and played some gigs, we could sell. We have actually sold CDs at Angela O'Neill, the woman who runs the record company, also has her own band. She sells our CDs at her gigs, and the money is so insignificant to us that we don't even. It's like whoever sells the CD keeps the money. Yeah. And look, if you're any kind of a decent size artist, right, you're going to be streaming 10,000, 20,000 or more of a couple of tunes at least, right? The tiny fraction of a cent. What did they say in that article? The maximum was
the maximum is 0.3 of 1 cent per stream. 0.3
of 1 cent per stream, and so for a typical artist, you're going to not even be getting that, right? Yeah. It amounts to nothing, and it doesn't pay for a microphone. It doesn't pay for, to upload your album onto CD Baby or whatever digital distributor you use is I think it was $70 or something. And then they distribute it out to all the Apples and Spotifys and Pandoras and all those people and Qobuz. Yeah. But, it's not even going to cover your cost of what you pay the digital distributor, right? So I'm going to look up while we're doing this. I'm going to see if I can just get a rough idea of what kind of streams Galaxy 500 is doing these days. They were a big band, I want to say 20 or 30 years ago, right?
1990-ish, yeah.
Okay, can I just point something out right away?
Mm-hmm.
Or their number one tune on Spotify has more than 12 million streams.
Wow.
No, I'm sorry. Here's one with 17 million streams. So I don't know what he's complaining about, but I have standing here and he does not. He's just a famous guy, right?
Well, but his new band, I think he's talking about Damon and Naomi, doesn't get nearly
let's see what they're pulling. But, he's actually gotten a little bit of money off Galaxy 500 streams if they didn't sign it all the way to the record company.
They might have done, yeah.
Yeah.
So let me read this real quick. This was surprising to me. The way Spotify accounts for the music it uses is a zero-sum game. Each of us is paid not by the individual listeners we attract to our recordings, but by the proportional share we can claim of the total money in the system. This seems like it might work out the same, but it doesn't. It slants toward the top, where massive numbers pull massive proportions of the pot. Down at the level of most tracks on the platform, a devoted fan who listens to the work of a lesser-known artist over and over again still pays most of their subscription money to Ed Sheeran, Drake, Taylor Swift, and Bad Bunny, even if they've never, ever streamed any of those very, very popular artists. I was a little surprised to find that, and I guess it's at first when I was presented with it, I was like, oh, okay, yeah. But then the more I thought about it, the more I realized, yeah, that is a distinction that makes a difference. And it's kind of like it kind of feels like an all or nothing thing. Like if you're not one of the biggest artists on there, then there's kind of almost no point in being there, All
right. So Damon and Naomi, their top tune on Spotify has been streamed 96,000 times. Okay, so I don't know what I don't know. I mean, he doesn't have standing. This would be thrown out in the court.
Okay.
I'm trying to calculate how much money they made off that. Still not very much. So it's $288. And usually the record company gets half. And so they are at, it's like $100.
Yeah.
It ain't much, but he's not affected by this. Maybe he's got something on there that hasn't pulled 1,000 streams, but probably not. I am affected by it. I don't care if you're not pulling 1,000 streams, for God's sake. You got way bigger problems than Spotify. It's just artists that are not streaming 1,000, right? Artists that are not streaming 1,000 are not doing this for the money. If they are, they are really deluded. Any younger, I mean, Ron and I, my partner in the band that we have, we just do this for kicks, right? I mean, we'd like to be successful. That'd be great if somebody hears it and says, you guys rock. I'm going to sign you to my record label and put you on tour. We go, we're only doing this for kicks. And so we can share it with our friends and stuff like that. And just for our own, we don't even come close to paying for. If I was keeping track of our CD sales and download sales, we've probably paid off of our hosting fees for CD Baby. But, we haven't paid off the pressing fees for the CDs that we made. We made a few hundred CDs, right, and sent them out for promo. We haven't, and we paid we paid a promoter to do that. It's like not even close to being a money-making venture. You could make a lot more money going onto a major street corner in any city and busking.
Yeah. I appreciate that perspective. There's one other thing that I did want to get your perspective on too. And this to me was the clincher for me. This made me mad. And to be fair, this is not just a Spotify thing. This is a US law thing, but this is ridiculous to me. And I'm just going to read this whole paragraph if you don't mind, if you'll allow me that indulgence. He says, why not pull our work off Spotify? I hear you saying. There's another reason we need help from our fans. In the US, at least, labor laws are such that artists cannot organize a mass removal of our work from a platform. Nor can we advocate that you, the consumer, stop using the platform in any coordinated fashion. Were we to do so, it is we, the artists, who could be sued by the platform for unfair business practices. You got that right. We are classified as suppliers for the streaming platforms, and coordination between suppliers and business is collusion, not organizing, as it would be if were classified as labor. That to me was really, really shocking. But I'm wondering if it's shocking or significant to you.
The amount of money that is involved is just so incredibly insignificant. And I'm just so surprised that this guy's upset about this when he is doing not a significant amount of streams, but a lot more than me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, take him out of the equation, though. I mean, just in principle, don't you think it's wrong that artists on Spotify can't, in any organized way, call for action on this because they are not classified as labor? They're classified as suppliers and could be sued. Like if the artists who were affected by this, forget Damon, if the artists who legitimately were affected by this tried to organize and call for action on this, Spotify could sue them. Does that strike you as wrong as it does to me?
I'm not. I kind of don't like that. However, I haven't thought through all the legal ramifications of that. I can look at one instance of a law and go like, that's a problem. But laws aren't enacted for that reason. Laws are enacted for their global effect that they're going to have. I mean, probably every law has a negative effect on somebody out there, right? A kind of an unfair effect on somebody out there, and. But I have to say, I'm going to engage in an appeal to hypocrisy here. What about YouTube? YouTube pays a fraction of what Spotify pays. And I think it's kind of wonderful in a way that this stuff does kind of sit out there forever. And an artist like Kate Bush, who was, in Siberia, all of a sudden is, pulled in, when that Running Down the Hill song or whatever it is, was on Stranger Things. She made like $2.8 million that year, which I'm sure is more money than she ever made before in a year. She
deserved it, I think.
And all of a sudden to have someone dump $2.8 million in your lap, it's pretty nice. Suck. And some other artists have, I'm sure that like, hey, look, man, if you look at like an old blues artist or something, right? Like Sun Seals, just to throw a name out there. Some of those guys are actually pulling a little money off streaming, and they were selling 0 albums, except for what they can sell off the bandstand, which they can still sell stuff off the bandstand. But, I kind of, as an artist, I don't have a problem with it. And I like the fact that I can get my art out there through any number of different streaming platforms at a really low cost to me, with no filter, I don't have to go groveling and, doing a dog and pony for some record company to please pay attention to me.
Yeah.
I can go do it. Now, granted, I'm probably getting the same amount of attention either way. I was listening to KNTU, the station from my alma mater, University of North Texas, and I was just casually listening to it through one of my Alexa speakers. What was it, last fall or whatever? And they played one of my tunes. Okay.
Oh, wow.
And I thought it was broken. I thought I'm like, wait, did I somehow accidentally stream something from my phone onto the speaker? Yeah. But then I looked at my phone. I'm like, wait a minute, they're actually playing my tune. And to me, amazing. That's worth way more than even if I rose to Damon, whatever his name's level, 100. Well, he's got to split it with her. So, with all 3 band members. So they're down into the $60 range.
Yeah.
And, of what they're going to make off of that number 1 tune off Spotify. And so it's like the fact that I heard that is worth way more than $60 to me.
Yeah.
And so for artists, I think, who are going to be affected by this, I think this guy is way off. I mean, look, some of his claims in terms of the legal aspects of it, I can sympathize with. But, and whether or not that law makes sense, I just don't know. But, a lawyer could think their way through that.
Man.
But the thing is,
I don't feel bad for canceling Spotify, though. I'll say that.
Well, I wouldn't
feel bad at all.
I wouldn't, fine. But I mean, there's plenty of reasons to cancel Spotify. But, so for him to say it's some great tragedy that the fraction of a penny that Ron and I would get off those streams is going to go to, let's make it really painful. Let's say it's the Eagles.
No.
Okay,
please,
wait a minute.
no.
Maybe I'm changing my mind now. Wait a minute. You mean to tell me that 1/1,000,000th of 1 penny of my money is going to the Eagles? That is unacceptable. I changed my mind.
There's
completely.
the outrage I was looking for. Oh man. I knew I'd bring you around eventually.
Cannot stand.
This aggression will not stand, man. Oh, buddy. Well, I think that's as good a place as any to wrap it up for most of our listeners. And so you want to do some credits?
Yeah. So we're going to have some music, which there's going to be one tune, by a new tune by the Butterburger House Band, which exists only in my head right now, but it will exist by the time this is edited. Because I'm going to do some tracks.
Thrown down, yeah.
I'm going to do some tracks tonight. I already know what I'm doing, and Dennis will, I hope, rise to the occasion and put some squeaks and squawks on top of there. And
I might do some guitar on it too.
You have your new synthesizer plug-in.
I've got a new synth I want to play with, but I've also been working up the courage to bring out the guitar too. So I don't know. We'll see.
Okay.
We'll see. I don't know.
Good. Well, you're going to do something. So we're going to have one Butterburger tune and one tune that we dredge out of. Let's dredge up another Butterburger tune and make it all Butterburger.
Excellent. Cool.
So we can share it. We can share the YouTube royalties equally.
We're not quite there yet. So you're going to be mixing and mastering and editing and all of that good stuff for this one?
Yep.
Yeah. So anything else?
No.
Any shout outs you want to give?
Let's credit.
Like
who should we credit? I don't know. Let's give credit to our friend Lauren Dragon from Wirecutter for getting onto 20,000 hertz.
Yeah, everybody. We'll put a link. We'll put a link to that episode in the show notes. That's
a big
awesome.
deal. Well, we get on more podcasts than she does.
But she gets on the really big ones.
Probably by well. Here's the thing:
she gets on ones that my dad has heard of.
We've gotten on easily an order of magnitude more podcasts than she has. However, she has gotten easily 3 orders of magnitude more listeners from that one podcast that we've ever gotten.
Yep. So, hey, we're doing the SVS thing, aren't we? Or by the time this goes out, we will have already done the SVS thing.
Wait, isn't that towards the end of the month?
No, I thought it was like this week.
We better figure it out.
Which will be last week by the time this goes out.
Okay, well, we'll have a link into we're going to be on SVS's podcast, or is it a YouTube channel?
It's a YouTube stream. Yeah, okay. Live stream.
Oh, good. You get to see Dennis again.
Oh, God. I'm backing out.
Come here.
Anyway, I think we've rambled enough, man.
Yeah.
So we should say thank you to everybody, but patrons, stick around. We got one more for you.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the end. If you liked what you heard and wish there'd been a little bit more of it, we got some good news for you.
Indeed, we do. If you check out patreon.com/Audio Unleashed, all one word, you can get new episodes a little earlier than everybody else.
And sometimes it's like a day or two early. Sometimes it's nearly a week. We never really know until we start editing.
But the big plus is that you get extended cuts of every episode. And usually that's going to mean a whole extra segment that's about maybe a geekier topic or something that's a little more personal to us or something that's just going to really appeal to the hardcore Audio Unleashed listener.
Yeah, what it boils down to is if you're somebody who would support Audio Unleashed on Patreon, we're going to make sure the bonuses to every episode are really aimed straight at your interests.
Yeah, and so if you want to hear these segments, you can subscribe to our Patreon for $3 a month, which is less than I spend every single day on my cup of coffee when I go to Starbucks to write my boring articles.
Yeah. One more time with that URL, that's patreon.com/Audio Unleashed.
Or Audio
Unleashed. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.